Welcome to today's episode of the J&M Backyard Orchard channel. Today's video is about feeding the worms in our worm cafe. We feed our worms weekly, usually on a Saturday morning. We start by collecting kitchen scraps over the week. We typically collect fruit peels such as banana and dragon fruit peels, and add vegetable scraps and store them in the refrigerator until the weekend. Every Saturday morning, we remove the container with our peels and blend them into a puree using our Thermomix. We feed this puree to the worms. The smaller and softer the scraps, the easier it is for the worms to digest and process into castings. Worms also like used coffee grounds, crushed eggshells, and shredded newspapers, which we feed occasionally. We purchased our worm farm from Bunnings, our local hardware store, about 3 years ago. It is a 3-tier tumbleweed worm cafe. We start by collecting 5 liters of rainwater in a watering can from our water tank to wash the cafe out and moisten the soil. We use rainwater to avoid the potential effects of chemical additives to town water during purification. After removing the lid of the cafe, we remove the blanket, which in our case is cardboard cutting, which we prepare by recycling packaging boxes and cutting them down to a size that fits the top of the cafe. We then pour water over the top of the cafe and collect the drippings in a bucket through the drain tap at the bottom of the cafe. The drippings essentially become the worm tea, which we use in our garden. We would often add a little more water and stir in some worm castings before using it as our fertilizer. It's effectively liquid gold for our plants. Next, we remove the old bedding and replace it with a fresh one, discarding the old bedding by placing it in a plastic bag and tossing it in the garbage bin. In the warmer months, we usually see red and white mites in the cafe, and these usually congregate on the inside of the top of the lid and the sides of the cafe. Each week we try to remove as many of these pests as possible by washing the lid and collecting the wash in the pail, which we then discard into the stormwater drain. The mites are drowned by this time. Next, we push aside some of the topsoil and pour the blended food into the small cavity in the soil. We then cover the food with the soil that was pushed aside. We sprinkled some mushroom compost over the top where the food was deposited. We also spread a thin layer of DE, or diatomaceous earth, which we purchased through Amazon. We use DE as an organic pesticide. It's a fine powder with tiny, sharp edges that can pierce the exoskeletons of insects, causing them to dehydrate and die. It works as a mechanical insecticide rather than a chemical one. Another purpose of using DE is to improve digestion in the worms, as they need grit for their gizzards. Finally, we collect the worm tea in the drain bucket and use it as a liquid fertilizer on our plants. This is how we feed our worms and maintain the Worm Cafe. Thanks for watching.